And Chris, thanks for coming out. How are you doing?
I'm terrific. Good to
Awesome.
speak with you.
Well, for those of you who are joining the video here, my name's Andrew with Zocomo TV, and I'm here with Chris Benda. He's a botanist, and what he does is he goes around Illinois identifying trees, and I believe endangered species. Chris, is that right?
All plants, all
All
kinds of plants.
all kinds. So
The big trees and the rare plants get most of the attention.
yeah, I see on your Facebook page you post a lot of posts about the grand champions. Is that right?
Yeah, the Illinois Big Tree Registry, the state champion trees. So that's a project that Illinois has had for a while. But I just learned this recently when I was out with a friend and colleague looking at big trees in the Springfield area, and he said at one time there was a committee that sort of governed this registry, and basically people had retired and moved on and various things passed away, and that Jay Hayek, who runs the program at the University of Illinois Extension Forestry, he basically agreed to steward it basically, and if it wasn't for him it may have fallen into ill attention. So it's really great that it's still going, and basically one person managing this program for the whole state is more than they can handle. And so a few years ago I proposed something to him, and then we found a funding source last year, and so we've teamed up, and I'm remeasuring a lot of the state champions that were previously nominated, and I'm nominating new ones as well. So it's really been kind of a fun project.
That's awesome. So how many trees would you say you've identified as grand champions or reconfirmed as grand champions?
Well, last year was the first year that I started this effort, and I measured or visited 40 trees across the state. And unfortunately, 10 of them were dead. But that also allowed me to find specimens that were alive that could take their place. And what was really actually kind of gratifying in that sense was several of the new champions that I proposed were actually bigger than the ones that had died anyway. So even if those ones still were in existence, I would have ousted them. So that kind of made it rewarding.
Got it. That's awesome. So
yeah,
aside from the obvious of knowing the largest of the trees and I guess the core of the species for the trees, like what would you say is the importance of going out and identifying the grand champions and knowing all these species in Illinois?
Well, I should want to mention also that I mentioned 40 trees that I did last year. I'm slated to do almost 60 I have on my list for this year. So a little more ambitious. And of course, the more attention I'm giving to the program, the more people who are asking me to come visit their tree. But I do want to reiterate, obviously, it's hard for Illinois is a big state. Jay is in Champaign. I'm in McAnda, just south of Carbondale. And so it's not realistic for me to, follow every wild goose, so to speak. But if somebody if they could send me a picture and they take a measurement, and there seems to be a reasonable chance that it could be a new champion, that I would do everything in my, control to try and visit and measure the tree. But to answer your question, first and foremost, really, this is a PR campaign. It is a way to get people engaged in the outdoors, looking at trees and admiring them and learning about them. But not a lot of people historically have nominated champion trees that weren't, connected obviously to not only where they were, but just like, in the field a lot. There's not a lot of lay people necessarily nominating big trees, but there are some, and that is, something that we really enjoy having people do.
Awesome. Well, it'd definitely be nice to get more citizen science out there and people can get connected with nature and understanding the value of that. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, also, I don't think that there was, so there were like bulletins that were produced and released, and eventually a website, but it was still relatively obscure, I think, to a lot of people.
Okay.
So there is now it's an interactive ArcGIS website where you can see where all the trees are and look at their statistics.
Well, that's
And
awesome.
so I can share that with you, and you can put a link here with your video.
So now I want to take the chance, Chris, to look at your website. So for those of you who, for those of us who are watching who haven't been to your website before, they can kind of go and know what to navigate. I had at least one question myself. So let's see if I can do a share screen here. So for those of you watching, if you want to see that information with the ArcGIS, just look down in the description below here. So Chris, we've got your website up. Can you see it on your end?
Yes.
All right, awesome. So Illinois Botanizer, were there any key things you wanted to point out to the viewers?
Yes, actually, I think if you click on the speaking schedule, I mean, it kind of speaks for itself, but there is an updated list of all the talks and presentations and various, engagements that I'm involved in. So it's one place where people can go to see what I have going on. And of course, with the pandemic era we're in, there are more and more virtual programs that I'm offering. And so I think that people will be interested to know about that. They can not only do it from the comfort of their home, but, may not live in the area where the event's being held.
Yeah, I was looking at this last night. It looks pretty cool.
Definitely got more and more that's coming in every day. And I am, returning to some in-person programming, but for the most, it's reduced capacity, mask wearing, or outdoors. So
Got it.
we're trying to figure out how to navigate, the world that is a reality with things being so different. But I would also like to show, if you go to the services tab.
There's a question on that real quick.
Yeah.
If someone wanted to schedule, like let's say a nonprofit or let's say a community organization of some type, like an HOA or so, how would they be able to contact you via your contact information and try to schedule you, or is that a thing you offer? Or?
Yeah, I offer a variety of different services. Travel has been limited a little bit late, but there's lots of potential for things. I give a lot of talks for libraries or different nonprofits like, Wild Ones or garden clubs, Illinois Native Plant Society chapters and various things. So there may be some interest there. And in fact, that's what I want to highlight here. If you just click on the services tab and scroll to the bottom, it has a list of, and there's my contact information right there on the top. So that's handy. But if you scroll down, it has a list of presentations, and
down all the way at the bottom.
There are people. Yeah, here we go. Presenters. So you can read about all the different programs that I've developed, and it's a little description of each. And I'm adding more. Every year I have 2 more that I've developed or going to develop that I've agreed to give this year. So there's lots of different topics, but for the most part, it's they're mostly plant related in one way or another.
I see you've got some slideshow presentations available as well.
Yeah, I haven't visited the SlideShare site in a while, honestly. So what's there is probably somewhat dated. But at one time, that was a useful thing to have connected to. But lastly, if you go back up to the options and just go to the plant database, this is something that I've been adding to for many years, and it's definitely a work in progress.
This is actually what I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah, I've been botanizing in Illinois, ever since I moved here in 2004. I moved here to go to graduate school at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and had a digital camera and really started learning plants of Illinois. And so that, it's been 15, 16 years or so, 17 years. So there's a lot of photos I've accumulated. And so I thought, well, let's try to put these together on a website. But like I said, some pages are mostly done. Some pages just have photos, but it's something that I'm adding to all the time as I explore the state.
And my question for this this page are these all indigenous plants?
They're not all indigenous plants, but I would say most of them are. In fact, the very top option there, Abutilon theophrastii,
Mm-hmm.
that is an agricultural weed that is not from North America.
Got it. You just identify plants that are in Illinois. That makes sense.
Yeah. You know, it's I'm less interested in invasive species as far as photographing them and stuff. So there's probably some underrepresentation of some common, you know, weedy non-natives, but there's all plants known to occur in the wild in Illinois are included.
Awesome. Well, I love it. I love it because I've been wanting to make something like this myself, and here you are. You've already started one, so that's awesome.
Well, in the Illinois wildflowers is really the site most people enjoy and know about, and has a lot of good information. And if you click on one of those plant pages again, you can see that if you scroll down on a page, that it will have a link to Illinois Wildflowers website right at the very bottom.
Yeah, I've used that a couple times just to help identify natives. That's awesome. We've definitely done a lot of good work.
So yeah, he's got a lot of awesome stuff, particularly about faunal associates. So it's like, well, why replicate? You know, just connect all these sites together.
Right. I agree. That's awesome. I think that kind of leads into the next question I have for you. So what would you say as a botanist are importance as, you know, citizens in relation to helping with reserves and the different parks and the refuges? We've got I think we have a Springbrook Prairie, which is nearby. I think they're national prairie. There's a lot of national prairies in Illinois. I've come to learn since I've moved here. So what would you say our role is as citizens and caretakers of these places?
Well, honestly, first and foremost, I think people need to generally just pay more attention to plants and think of them as more than background or green things out there. I think a lot of people may be able to identify, you know, maybe a handful of trees, perhaps, but you know, when you think about the 3,600 plus species of plants in Illinois, you know, most people don't know what any of them are, really paying attention. So I think observing is a good place where I'd like people to, you know, spend their time, but also is looking at and thinking about the landscape and the level of degradation, right? So our natural areas are the places that have not seen a lot of negative disturbance. So they're intact in a pristine condition, but the majority is. But even among that, for people to realize that an old field, a mowed city park, you know, or their lawn, versus like the Shawnee National Forest versus the really nice parts of the Shawnee National Forest, you know, the gradient of natural quality. Right. And it's not, if you think of the landscape as either developed or undeveloped, you know, it's a lot finer scale than that, of course. But what I'm getting at is we need more public support for protection and maintenance of our natural areas, of which there's just, you know, less than, you know, 1/100% remaining in the whole state. There's hardly any high quality natural communities intact. And so we need to have a lot of public will behind their protection and their persistence.
Yeah.
So that's something I really like people to think about.
Yeah. I mean, I read a statistic a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, that only 1% of the traditional tallgrass prairie still exists. And I think that's crazy because a lot of Illinois used to be tallgrass prairie. So I
1% across the whole United States.
That's what the statistic said. I forget where it was from, but that was insane.
Because, you know, in Illinois, it's way less than 1%. It's a fraction of a percent.
Yeah.
And that is really astonishing. It's 22 million acres were in Illinois in prairie, and we have 2,200 that are high quality, sort of, you know, unplowed, intact remnants of the past.
Wow.
2,200 acres out of 22 million.
Undisturbed, totally undisturbed. That's insane.
You know, mostly for the most part, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have, you know, weedy species are moving around everywhere, but yeah, it's like the true tall grass prairie. A little piece of it remains, and it's very, very little. And that's what's discouraging, and why I want, you know, folks to understand that some places that are priceless and that are really true natural areas never been touched, because Belleville Prairie is in Rockford at the airport, and it's slated for destruction because of very, you know, short-sighted, you know, airport board, frankly, that are making these decisions. And the alarm was sound, and or the, you know, we put out the cause, and some small success was made, but it seems imminent to be destroyed. And it's because we don't have enough people coming forward and pushing for it and caring for it and speaking on its behalf. And to me, that's, you know, issue that I think is foremost in my mind.
Yeah, I've been following the Belleville Prairie stuff for a few months now. I think it's sad because I've seen proposals on how to preserve it and even expand it a little bit over time, and it just seems like a lot of people just aren't caring. So for viewers, I'll put a link below for that.
You know, at least not enough of the people who somehow are influential enough. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of high-profile organizations involved, or several, I should say, at least, but it hasn't seemed to made a difference. And so we need to get, you know, somehow influence to the key players who can really change things. And so far, so not good. And, you know, like you said, the people who are in charge have been presented with alternatives, and they haven't even entertained it in the slightest. And that's been really discouraging too, because you'd think that, you know, people who are appointed in a public capacity should be receptive to, you know, the things that are brought to their attention. We have a whole review process at the federal level for all sorts of policy changes. And
right.
So you would think that if you didn't know, okay, we can understand that, but now you do know. And so to purposely ignore it, or to try to, you know, make a false analogy to some other aspect, like, oh, you're against the economy. Well, no, like you said, we can do both. So it's been discouraging that they've taken that position.
Yeah, I'll definitely put a link to this Save Belleville Prairie in the description, so for those of you watching, you can read about it. But as Chris was saying, it's one of the traditional prairies in Illinois. It's not even that big, but it's still undisturbed and it's native. So it's disturbing that the officials aren't looking at it as well as we're hoping they would. But I think, Chris, this ties in well with the next question: is how do you think we as homeowners can use our own backyards to help fight invasives and help promote the native landscaping? I never used to know native landscaping was a thing until maybe 6 months ago. So how do you think we can help in our own backyards?
Well, I think kind of like what I sort of alluded to somewhat earlier, is people think that often the idea is that nature is out there somewhere else. And so I don't have to worry about it here because there's other places for it to live. And there really aren't that much. Even when you think of like the American West, where people know that there's a lot of undeveloped land in public ownership, you know, all that land has been abused. It's all grazed, and it's not like it used to be. So, and plus they're just in aggregate still not that much. We have the majority of the land in the United States in public ownership, or private ownership. So we need contributions from everybody if we are going to help, you know, things to survive. So, you know, the basic idea is native animals need native plants, and the people are sterilizing basically their yard with calorie pears, or, you know, trees that are not from North America, and then, you know, turf grass that is also not from North America, but also is mowed, and very few things can live there. And we're seeing these effects, of course, of changing the landscape this dramatically in the last 100 years. So everybody can help this in their own way by, you know, promoting native plants in their yard. And this is an idea, of course, that Doug Tallamy has made very popular of late, and a lot of people know of his efforts. And he's an entomologist, and so he talks about caterpillars a lot, and how, you know, a cherry tree or an oak can, you know, harbor hundreds of species, whereas
Right.
calorie pair or these non-native ones have 0.
Right. That was something I'm glad I started finding all these native landscaping groups on Facebook. Because introduced me to Doug Tallamy, but also I never really understood the impact that non-native plants had towards native populations of plants and insects. Because when I was younger, I just had the opinion, well, if an invasive plant is doing well, why worry about getting rid of it? And then I've been learning with all these individuals and talking to these passionate people that, hey, the native plants are going to support the native population of insects, the wildlife, whereas the stuff that's been brought in from overseas, the insects, they haven't evolved, they haven't been designed to utilize that. So that was a big eye opener for me. So thank you for sharing for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gets a little sort of choosing your words carefully sometimes on this subject. I've thought about it because some of the harder people to convince will say they don't want insects in their yard. They don't want bees or wasps or whatever. And so I feel like the thing that the approach that is helpful for a skeptic in this sense is butterflies and birds. I think it'd be hard to find a person who doesn't want there to be more butterflies or birds that are visiting or flying by or what have you. And that's the idea with the birds is, baby birds exclusively eat invertebrates and they can't eat seeds. So the parents need to go out and find, hundreds and thousands of caterpillars and things to feed their young. And of course, those caterpillars are very specific in a lot of cases to particular plants, and always with native plants. And so there's I think a connection, I think, for people who may be a little skeptical about doing something with their landscaping. But I also wanted to say that I think one of the most an awesome thing about native plant landscaping too is that you can feel like you're making a difference. This is something you can do in your own yard, in your own time, and see the effects of that and feel that gratification. So I think that really helps people to connect with the idea.
The one thing I like about it too is I see a lot of posts where people are talking about they've redone not even their whole yard, just a small portion of it, and they always talk about how their neighbors walk by and they stop and comment, oh, your yard looks amazing, love all the flowers, I love all the butterflies stopping by. So it's not only do we get to benefit from it ourselves, but so do our neighbors, so our neighborhoods, and that's really awesome.
Definitely, and that's what we need to make a difference is, on that large scale. Tallamy says it's the homegrown national park. You put all these pieces together where people are doing what they can in their yards, and you can have a lot of land in the end. That's really changed.
Do you remember what the percentage he says would help turn things around? I think what is like 50% or something like that. Does that sound right to you?
I wanted to say 50, but that sounds about right to me.
I don't know. We'll find out. I think he wrote a book on it, so we can read the book.
Absolutely.
So I guess that brings us to our next question here is, so entomologist Edward Wilson passed recently. So what do you think we can learn from his legacy, looking back on his life and his career? And from what I understand, he had a close relationship with Doug Tallamy later on towards his career as well. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, he was influential to me.
Okay.
The Diversity of Life was a book that I read early on in my studies into biology. But I think that one of the things that he really did well that people should remember is he was really good at communicating complex things in a way that everyone could understand. So not only did he do really, important research and make many scientific discoveries, if you read through some of his quotes that you can find, he says some pretty simple and obvious things in the end, but the way that he says them is just, it's so eloquent. And I think that he had an ability to connect to people and not wasn't just a scientist in his lab, working in obscurity. And
Right.
I think that was a big contribution. The other thing that comes to mind that he, I think, would want everybody to remember is curiosity and
Okay.
having marveling at nature and making observations, thinking about things and observing, and of course take it to the next level, do some hypothesis and testing. But I think he did inspire a lot of people to just pay attention and to realize that there's a lot out there to know and understand and observe and enjoy.
Okay. So that's really good because, yeah, I wasn't saddened by it because I didn't know who he was before I saw the articles. But I definitely looked into some of his work on some of the books he's written, and definitely wanting to read quite a bit. I thought it was fascinating his research with ants and being pollinators. I didn't know ants were pollinators until I started learning about native landscaping. So I'm glad that he's done all that work for us.
Definitely. Definitely a big inspiration, a lot of scientific contribution there. And one of his quotes that I really like and say a lot is that every scrap of biodiversity is priceless, never to be surrendered without a struggle. And that's unfortunately where we're at, but that's how I feel as well. That listen, we've reduced everything to such a small amount that we're going to do what we can to try to preserve what's left.
Right. That's awesome. Well, now it's time for the fun questions, Chris. If you got to dig into your books, what would you say your favorite plants around Illinois? Some of your favorite native plants, the trees, shrubs, flowers, any sedges?
Well, obviously, as you can imagine, I think it's hard to pick a species, but I'm crazy about orchids. I love Illinois, wild orchids. The orchid family is the largest in the world, so there's lots and lots of kinds, but I think most people, in the diversity is in the tropics, so people associate them with Florida and like I said, right, tropical areas, but they're throughout, all over the place. And in Illinois, we have over 50 species that have been known at one time to occur here. I have 2 left to photograph that have evaded me so far: the Coleorrhiza maculata and Coeloglossum viridi are 2 that I've yet to see and photograph. But otherwise, well, all the extant ones. So there's ones that used to occur in Illinois that no longer do. That there's a few of those that I need to travel to other states and photograph. But as far as the ones that still currently exist, I have 2 remaining to check off.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Otherwise I would say the rare plants. I've been doing this new job this year where I'm coordinating the Plants of Concern program in Southern Illinois. So we're working with volunteers, going out to monitor rare species, and I've seen a number of things this last summer and season that I'd never seen before, and a lot of them are quite beautiful. And it's just it's a scavenger hunt, so it's rewarding when you are successful. And so it's really been an amazing year, and there's a number of just beautiful. I like flowers, that for me, right. I didn't grow up loving plants and having this connection with the earth or whatever. It came later in life. And honestly, when I first started paying attention to plants, I only was looking at flowers, and I would photograph flowers, and I would use Newcomb's or Peterson's wildflower guides and figure out what they were. And that's what hooked me. And of course, I later learned to look at other aspects of the plant and to really get to know the vegetative characteristics. But originally for me, I loved flowers and color and beauty. So my favorite plants would be ones, that fit those descriptions, lilium, and like synandras and trilliums and, things like that.
Well, one of the things, this is kind of a selfish thing for me. One of the things I like about what you do is on your Facebook page, you share a lot of the plants when you find them. That's something I appreciate because a lot of these plants I don't even know about. I'm from California originally. So when you find those rare plants, it's really exciting. It's like, oh, cool, it's a rare plant in this new place. So thanks for doing that.
Absolutely. It's a labor of love, but it's fun to share, and people tell me that, like you just said, enough to make sure that I keep going on it. So awesome. Thanks for checking it out.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add before we end our session here?
The only other thing I can think of is that if folks are interested in native plants in Illinois or whatever state you're in, most states have a native plant society. And so in Illinois, it's the Illinois Native Plant Society, and we have 7 chapters throughout the state. I was president of the chapter here in Carbondale for 10 years, and I was president of the whole state deal 4 or 5 years ago. So I encourage people to become members and support this organization, which really is the place for native plant advocacy essentially in Illinois. So, but whatever state you're in, look up your Native Plant Society and consider joining.
Awesome. There's also, I think, Wild Ones is pretty active here in Illinois as well.
Yep, they're a good organization too, for sure.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Chris. I'll definitely put those links in the description below so people can find them, and I really appreciate sharing your wisdom with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. Take care.